Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program for and by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Welcome, I'm Joe Barnhart, and this is 2013. What's the date?
March 12th.
March 12th.
Okay, and I'm Faithless Forrest, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and people curious about living a life free of supernatural beliefs.
We have a call-in show, so call in. I'd be very pleased to hear your comments, your questions, and try tweet if you can't get through. The shows are a production of the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee and the supporters.
All right. Today our topic is bootlegging religion into science courses in the public schools.
Yeah.
So thanks for being with us today, and we're going to introduce the sponsors. I guess I'm going to grab that, Joe?
Yeah, the
Sure.
Atheists of East, go ahead.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun meetup, often at a bar or restaurant. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's Taproom and Pizzeria during happy hour after the show for food, drink, and conversation. To find us, just look for the silver jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. Also, the Rationalists of East Tennessee, who have monthly activities on the first and third Sunday mornings. They are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday of the month is an afternoon book club. The fourth Sunday is the Reflections Gathering, which is a potluck get-together at a member's home with a discussion topic. And last March, members traveled to Washington for the Reason Rally. And just last week, ASK and RET members made a road trip, a pilgrimage, if you will, to visit Richard Dawkins in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, good. You need to have a whole program on what you learned there.
It was an interesting interview with Herb Silverman, who is one of the founding members of a group whose last name has something like Secular Humanists of the Low Country or something like that. Of the Low Country, I'm kind of confident of. The rest, the first part of that, I'm a little fuzzy on.
Okay, now some of you have been looking at the smoke going up to see who's going to be the new pope. We don't believe that coincidence is implied here, but there's a causality of who's speaking. Well, we're speaking of the pope, for example.
All right. Well, it is remarkable that within days of each other, the Pope resigns, and there is an announcement that a child is thought to have been cured of HIV. This is the virus that causes AIDS.
Yeah.
This is a child who was born HIV positive, but they applied aggressive treatment at a very early age, and that child appears to be HIV free. So that's a very noteworthy thing.
Yes, and the point we're trying to make is if the Pope and his group would listen more to the nuns, they would say, let's encourage people to use birth control devices. That's one way to help prevent venereal diseases. Abstinence, of course, is another way. But if you're going to have intercourse, then, of course, you need to have some way to protect yourself and the child, too.
That's right. All levity aside, the Catholic Church has been a big obstacle to the prevention of the spread of AIDS,
and that's
especially on the continent of Africa.
Yeah, that's primarily the Catholic male hierarchy.
Yeah. We really don't need robed ignorance. We need more doctors and medical scientists. And it was suggested on a website that I was reading today that the Vatican be liquidated and the proceeds contributed to medical research.
Now, two people in Chattanooga are suing to get equal opportunity for non-believers at the invocations before the county governments. It'll be interesting to see what that's going to turn into and what the motives are.
So I got here a quote from their webpage.
No, you read that. You met him.
So they say, we, Tommy Coleman and Brandon Jones, are suing the Hamilton County government to cease sectarian prayer activities that violate the Constitution at its commission meetings.
Yeah.
This is a landmark case that will change an important legal precedent and make it easier to enforce separation of church and state with regard to legislative prayer in further cases. They go on, skipping over some. This is an important issue to people of all faiths, including Christianity. This is because religion is being used isn't the government, because the religion being used isn't the important factor, it's the endorsement of religion by our government. That's key.
Yeah.
He asked people to please stand up for the Constitution and support us as we continue to fight for a moment of silence at our commission meetings. Well, if the technology were to be with us, we might be able to get Tommy here. I'm going to push the button and see if I can make it happen.
Is it on?
Well, no. He's coming in through the other phone here.
Okay, it's a very important case, and we'll have to see if this is going to...
Hi, Lee.
All right. Hello, Tommy. Are you hearing us?
I am. I'm about to be somewhere stationary. In about one more minute, I'm in the car, but I can hear you fine.
All righty. Well, we were just talking a bit about...
Hello?
We're hearing you. We were talking about the newspaper article in the Knoxville News-Sentinel, and we read a little bit about what you and Brandon Jones are doing.
In Hamilton County, yeah.
There in Hamilton County. And we're hoping that you'll be able to talk to us safely here any second. And I guess I was kind of wondering, when did this all start?
Back, I believe it was June 6th. Of 2012. Brandon Jones and myself went to the county commission and asked them to replace the sectarian prayers they've had with a moment of silence that would be respectful of people of all religions and people of none.
All right,
and we essentially got quite a few chuckles from them, and some noses thumbed at us, and that was that for the day.
Okie dokie. So apparently, in the intervening time, you've been escalating in various means. Maybe we should ask, what are your religious beliefs?
My religious beliefs? I'm a secular humanist. I feel that describes many things that I do believe in, as opposed to simply identifying as an atheist. No, I don't believe
in secular humanist.
Yeah. But I want to let people know, things that I do believe in, things I do hold dear and have faith in, which is humanity, and I want what's good for humans.
All right. So, does this mean you're against all prayer?
Actually not. We are very pro-prayer. We have no stance on religion or non-religion. We are pro-prayer through a moment of silence. We think the most truest statement ever is that with a moment of silence at the county commission, they will have more prayer there than they've ever wanted. And so I really think the county commission is against religious freedom, religious diversity, and quite honestly, prayer. They only want a specific type of prayer there. We want to allow prayer through a moment of silence, or people to enjoy the moment of silence who maybe aren't religious, atheists, secular humanists as they see fit.
Are you aware that at one time in this country, say in South Carolina and other states, it was thought that the state existed for one religion only, and it wasn't just Christianity, it was Protestantism. They didn't take the broader view that included other Christians, but just the Protestant version. And of course in Europe you had the opposite in some countries before the Reformation. It was Catholicism. So in this country we had the problem of trying to sort all this out.
All right, so...
I can even, I guess we could look back 40, 50 years when there was a great concern about possibly having a Catholic president. A few years back, we had concern about actually having a Mormon president. So it's not just, a fear of people who aren't religious. It's
a particular religion, yeah.
a certain brand of Christianity that appears to be very fiercely opposed and concerned with other religious beliefs as well.
Meaning, when you say opposed and concerned, meaning they want the public pulpit and they want to deny others the public pulpit.
Yes, correct. And only a select few. I have many friends who are Christians, and many of my friends who are Christians support what we're doing. They recognize that a moment of silence doesn't impose anything on them. It's respectful to them and respectful to many of their friends, people like myself. There are a great many pagans and Wiccans in Hamilton County as well. And the way the county commission has their policy worded, they don't want to give any of us a voice.
Let me ask you a question. You're saying, if I'm understanding you, if you had a moment of silence, then for those who want to pray silently, they can do it. And those who want to meditate silently, they can do it. Or those who want to think about something else, they can do it. But they don't need the state to verbalize any particular version. Is that your view?
Certainly.
Okay.
Absolutely. The county commission actually has 7 pages of a bureaucracy they created here that directly entangles the government of Hamilton County with religion. They're saying, who is a religious assembly, who is not. They're talking about tax status. They're talking about things that can and cannot be said in these prayers. So it seems like they're really, they have 7 pages. They have a 7-page solution to our 3-word moment of silence.
Wow,
So
that's great.
Having politicians to making religious distinctions among denominations.
So, does their 7-page solution address the issue of having explicitly Christian prayer and praying in Jesus' name, as is so common the case?
Well, of course, the way they have it worded, it's a lot of language trickery, and it's not actually their policy. They were handed it to them by the Alliance Defense Fund, which is an extremely right-wing, ultra-conservative, ultra-Christian organization. So when the county talks about its policy, it's really something that was just handed to them last minute because they had no clue what to do. And what it does is the Alliance Defense Fund has been carving out this policy for a little over 10 years now. It showed its ugly head in various forums and similar commission meetings, and it has been shot down many times before.
Tommy, can you tell us, where has it been struck down?
I don't have the cases off the top of my head, but I think there's a Joyner case in the Fourth Circuit, I believe, was the most recent. Forsyth and Joyner.
Did you know that in the about 1990, the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, which at that time was probably the largest Protestant denomination in the country, at least before their split, the president said, "The Lord Almighty does not hear the prayer of a Jew." Now that's pretty blatant, but that was his view. And that's why sometimes you hear some Christians having that praying in the name of Jesus, the little phrase tacked on so they'd make sure it got through, apparently.
Make sure differentiating themselves between Christians and Jews. Huh?
Those versions of Christians. Not all Christians hold to that particular view, however.
All right. Well, so why is it that you decided to take on a task like this in the middle of the Bible Belt?
Well, I had heard about the Freedom from Religion Foundation sending the letter, and I thought, you know what, this is good. It's glad to see that there's an organization that is going to speak up for the many people in this county and across, the U.S. who feel the same way. But I knew specifically here in the Bible Belt that wouldn't be enough, that they would be seen as an organization, coming in, small town, saying, you guys can't pray. And I knew it wasn't that, but it would be risked is being seen as such if people in the local community did not take action in support of what they were doing.
And that's why you and Brandon Jones are acting then, I'm inferring, as local plaintiffs?
Well, we have Mr. Jones and myself, who are just two friends. We're both college students. We have no legal connections with any organizations, not being funded by any such. With the help of Mr. Jones, we actually raised over $5,000 to assist in court costs associated with our case. And then we found our wonderful attorney, Mr. Robin Flores, who's a civil rights attorney in town, and he's doing this. He volunteered to take this on for us pro bono.
Good. When do you
show no allegiance to anyone else, any organizations? We are dedicated to the citizens of Hamilton County.
There must still be court costs and stuff associated with this. Meaning, just because you've got a helpful lawyer, you still are putting your resources on the line. Well,
we did. We were able to, with the help of Hamed Matan, the Friendly Atheist online, and some other bloggers, we had a Go Get Funding link, and as our lawyer informed us, we would need X amount of money at hand in case of appeals, filing costs, and we would need to produce rapidly. So with the help of some of the online bloggers, we were able to raise over $5,000, and we have that in the escrow account right now for our attorney to use. And he's already used some of it in the form of our appeal.
Okay. Let me ask you, I have a question.
You'll be hearing just this month.
Okay, we've got to move on to another topic, but let me ask you a question. Have you set a date for, or has a court date been set?
See, we're still at the preliminary injunction.
Okay.
So April 24th in Cincinnati, Ohio, the U.S. Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals will hear oral argument from both sides, from our attorney, Robert Flores, and the ADS attorney or attorneys in Cincinnati, Ohio. And we don't know if we'll have a ruling as to whether they're going to temporarily halt prayers on that day.
Can you get back?
Give us an injunction. That's very optimistic. And if they don't, well, I guess that allows the county commission to further dig themselves into a hole and give us more evidence for the real trial.
Okay. Can you keep us posted on this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All righty.
Well, we appreciate your coming in on this, and we want to be talking with you at a later date after this develops. We want to see how this turns out. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure, and if anyone out there listening is interested, you can type in Hamilton County for Separation of Church and State on Facebook, and we have a page there where we post links, and you can communicate with us.
Yeah.
Okay. And your organization, again, for our viewers, is the Hamilton County for Separation of Church and State. So if they're to Google it or go to the Facebook and do a search on that, that'll get them to the public face of your activity, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for calling in, and we'll be back in touch with you. We want to follow through a whole program on this.
All right.
All right.
Thank you
very much.
Tommy, we'll wish you a good afternoon then. Thank you.
You too. Good afternoon. Bye.
Yeah, this needs to be followed up in each legal step to see. This could lead to the Supreme Court.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think
it already has.
I think these things have been decided, and if the judicial system was doing its job, they would strike it down at the lowest level where it enters.
Yeah, it's in the Constitution, for one thing, already.
Yeah. So let's remind viewers that this is a call-in program, and the phone number is there on the screen. You can call us now. We're going to talk about church-state separation issues, in particular, and how it affects the teaching of science in the classroom.
Yes.
All right. Joe, how do you want to start this?
Okay. First of all, I got a grant once from the state of Texas. I had mentioned, I think, once on this program, to bring principals and superintendents in to talk about the issue of keeping science as science, and then dealing with the question of whether or not you want to have courses in religion in the public schools. My point was that if you're going to teach science, it's science. It's not metaphysics.
Joe, for the benefit of our viewers, what does metaphysics mean?
Well, metaphysics is just a Greek word. Meta means after, and physis is physics. So in the Library of Alexandria, it's those books after physics. And they had to do with the question of whether there's a God, or whether the world is what today would call naturalism, with no supernaturalism, and the whole mind-body problem develops out of that. But and this was at the time before what we call modern science existed. But even then, they were trying to deal with the separation of these kinds of disciplines, so that each discipline could do its own research without becoming bogged down in another research. Now, it's fair enough to say if you want to get into one field, another field, and see how they connect, that's okay. But that's philosophy.
Okay.
Now, if you want to have, now that's the question.
In other words, be clear that you're doing it.
Be clear that you're doing it. Let the scientists do their work. It's hard enough as it is, without making them get bogged down in other questions that have no direct connection with their scientific work. Now, if you want to make connections with other things, try it. And then ask yourself, well, how do you do it? And we can talk about on this program, how do you have if you want to have in high school a religion course and a philosophy course, let's talk about it.
So you applied for a grant, or you received a grant to try to bring school administrators together to negotiate this issue.
Yeah, to try to figure out how do you deal with these problems.
So I assume you had attendees, and perhaps of one extreme or the other?
Well, they didn't seem to be, greatly extreme. I'll give you an example. One principal said, he was worried about whether you could even teach evolution. This was in Texas. Now, that seemed to me, if you're going to have a science course in biology, you have to deal with biology. Otherwise, you're not doing science. And he understood that.
I need to ask for clarification. When you say he was worried about whether or not he could teach evolution, it's not obvious to me what you think what that worry was about.
Well, see, you remember, he in the position as a principal. That's not only a job of an educator, he's also a politician. And he has to deal with people who, many of them, don't understand very much about what science is.
So when you say he was worried about whether or not he could teach it, meaning that whether or not he would be allowed to teach it?
Allowed to teach it, and whether he could keep his job. You see, that's a big problem for school administrators. Now, what he suggested, and I don't think it's a great suggestion, but you can see the difficulty he had as a principal. Actually a superintendent. He said, go ahead and teach evolution, but call it developmentalism, or give it another name.
They call it change over time. They avoid the E word.
And that's all it amounts to. And then I asked the question, could you have courses in religion studies, the academic study of religion? And that answer was as clear as the book of Revelation.
I've read Revelations. I know what you mean.
And it's understandable, because from this man's point of view, it's an exceedingly difficult question, because there's so many different versions of whose religion you're going to talk about.
Well, in fact, I would say when we say study of religion, some people are going to say, they're going to assume that the study will be exclusively their religion, not realizing that
that's what some people think.
It has to be all religions.
And when some people say the Christian religion, they sometimes forget that's an enormous diversity. I'll give you an example. In this town, on March 14 and 15, you're going to have a Catholic scholar who's going to be at Episcopal Church with other people who are neither Episcopal nor Catholic, studying the issue of the historical Jesus question.
Okay.
Now, the Catholic scholar holds to a view that seems clearly to me not in keeping with traditional Catholic thinking, way beyond it.
Well, since I don't know his view nor traditional Catholic thinking, give me some detail here.
Okay, I think if I'm understanding him at all, and he's a very good scholar, he really leaves aside the whole issue in the Gospel of John of whether or not Jesus was God on earth.
Okay.
And they deal with what's called the synoptic Gospels, Mark, Luke, and John.
Okay.
And Mark will say the Son of God. But that's out of a long tradition. For example, in Genesis 6, you have, now these are monotheists having sons of God. In the 6th chapter of Genesis, you have sons of God. What in the world is this in a monotheistic religion? Well, later on, you have people saying, well, those are angels. That's not what it says. You see, that
they're trying to Genesis, where it refers to the sons of God.
Yeah. Now,
who came down and made love to the daughters of men.
That's exactly. And now the question is, the issue we're dealing with is trying to show within the Catholic tradition, you have various diversions and different versions and diversions of Orthodox Christianity, just in the Catholic tradition. In the Protestant tradition, you have the same thing. So if you're going to say in the school system, well, I'll give you an example. In about 1920, if my memory serves me well, you had almost a riot in Pennsylvania, I believe in Philadelphia, in which the Catholics at that time and the Protestants were at each other's throats because they were disputing as to whether to have the King James Version or the Catholic version of the Bible.
In the public schools.
Yes.
I think you said 1920s, but isn't that really the 1820s?
Well, no, I'm
thinking there were riots in something like the 1820s as well, but there may have been more than one.
Well, it's been my memory is not infallible, but that's my memory, but I could be wrong. But anyhow, the whole point is, the issue is, even if you have Bible study, which version? Now, in a real academic setting, as you would say at the University of Tennessee or Carson Newman or Maryville College, where they really study this, you would get any version, including the Greek and the Hebrew, and you'd do comparisons, and you'd study the history of how these whole things developed.
So it wouldn't be so much which version, it would be all versions.
Yeah, and how they came to be versions at all. In other words, if you're going to, the academic study of religion is one thing. You know, I'll give you, if you want a real bad example, and it is a bad example. Let's suppose you want to study the development of lethal viruses, okay?
All right.
Then it's important to get the facts and study it. You aren't recommending one of those, you see. You're just studying it.
Yes.
So what I'm saying to people who don't hold to a religion, then you can still study a religion if you think it's lethal. Nevertheless, you study it.
Yeah.
And if you are a believer in one of these religions, you can't believe in all of them, unless you just can't make any distinctions, then you have to make clear what one says and what another says. And then that's what, for example, we had a speaker last time who speaks at the community college, and he can trace out one religion, like Islam, trace out another, versions of Christianity, versions of Buddhism, and that's what an academic understanding is. It isn't his job to help bring somebody to believe in one of these.
A particular one, no picking and choosing.
Yeah, and it isn't his job to say, don't believe. His job is simply lay it out so you can do your own thinking. And that's what the academics study. Now the question is, can you have the academic study of religion in high school?
Meaning, can you do it without doing it so badly that it'll cause those riots of which you spoke.
Well, first of all, some
so
people...
we got here talking about that you've got this grant to have this meeting in Texas, and then we talked about, you know, the difficulty in teaching evolution. The administrators fear they'd lose their job, and then I guess we were talking about the study of religion. And when you say or teaching religion, did they understand it would be teaching about religion, and how did that develop? Where did they go with that?
That's a clear distinction made, I think, in 1963 by the Supreme Court, teaching about religion, using the word about. In other words, you're not proselytizing. That's not the job of an academic setting.
You're not teaching that one is true.
Well, yeah, you don't even get into the question of which one is true or not. That's not the issue. The job is simply to explain it as to what's going on from their point of view. In other words, let's suppose you're dealing with the concept of the Trinity, okay? Then you can trace out the growth and the development of different theories of whether God is three persons in one or one substance. See, in other words, just as you can find development of the different stages of a growth of an organism, so you can find the various development stages of a theory, whether it's in science or metaphysics or theology. What I'm suggesting is if you're going to teach science, you don't get into theology. You do science. Now, if you want to have a course in the high school, a philosophy of religion, you can do this, but it has to be an academic. You have to study various viewpoints, present each viewpoint with accuracy and fairness, plus internal criticism for consistency.
Okay, and when you mention presenting accurately each point of view, what would the opposite of that be? There's a term I'm looking to define here.
Well, I don't want to complicate it. We all know what misrepresentation is. Right. In other words,
why would someone misrepresent something?
Well, it's easy to do when you... We all have to... That's why it's called a discipline. You have to discipline yourself to move now away from your own position right now and submerge yourself as a thinker inside another point of view using their language and their frame of reference. Many people can't do that because they don't have the discipline. And that's what a teacher's job is. If you're a philosophy teacher and you can't do that, you're not a philosophy teacher.
I guess I've encountered people where I think they can't even understand that in order to evaluate it, you've got to look at it and then ask such questions. Is it self-consistent?
Yeah.
Is it consistent? Does it contradict things I know? Does it do a better job of explaining things I know? That there are people incapable of realizing that would be how you even approach it. Even if they're not able to do it, they don't even understand that those are the steps that should be taken.
Yeah. If I'm going to, for example, refute your viewpoint, let's say, my first obligation is discipline myself and learn your viewpoint. And that may take a long time, especially some of your views. That take a long time because you spent years on these views. And so for me to just hop in and think I could somehow explain it would be foolish. I'd have to discipline myself. That's why teachers have to go to school for a long time. It's just like an apprentice in being an electrician. I couldn't go in and be an electrician.
You've got to learn how all the pieces work and how they work together.
And so if a teacher is going to be teaching courses for electricians, he's got to learn from electricians in the first place.
There we go.
So that's what it means to become, in that sense, an insider imaginatively.
All right, so with respect to this action in Texas, how'd they do? Are they teaching evolution in Texas, or they're doing so by renaming it?
Well, in Texas, it depends upon the school system and the local.
Let's say the school systems of the attendees of your grant lecture. How do you think they're doing?
I think at that point they still differed. See, part of it is you have to hire teachers who know the material. And that's a very difficult problem. You know, if they don't know the material, they can't teach it. I mean, that's step number one.
All right.
And then even then, some principals will listen to outsiders who are not interested in you know, academic accuracy. They will, because they're politicians, they will listen to these voices and then put pressure on the teacher, not to, in effect, not to do their job properly. I taught in one school like that once, and I realized this was a president at that time who simply didn't know enough about my field to make any criticisms. He should have kept his nose.
And when you say president, this would be a college president?
This is a college president. Now, that college has changed enormously, but at that time, that's been a long time ago, this president thought it was his job to go around and tell teachers.
Micromanage the curriculum.
Yeah, and he didn't know enough. Even if he could, he didn't know enough. I mean, he didn't understand what a college president job was.
All righty. Well, Joe, we're a little past the halfway point. Why don't we do our mid-program breaks here, and that'll let our viewers understand a little bit more about our program.
Oh, good. Let me put this aside here, so we'll.
All right. Go again. Mid-program break.
Okay.
Grab the first part.
In case you are just tuning in, this is the Freethought Forum, and we're sponsored by the Atheists Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. And it's funded jointly by them and other individuals who make good contributions. Every Tuesday from 5 to 6 is when we're here, and I hope you'll tell your friends and streamline us online, ctvknox.org.
This is a call-in show, and we are live today, March 12th, 2013. Viewers can call now on the number on your screen or tweet us at FFTVKNOX.
Okay, now.
Maybe our studio audience will get up their Twitter feed and let us know if we're getting any calls.
Okay. Well, 2 times a week, the Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, have evening meetups for food and conversation and so forth. ASK is the organization. It's a venue for community and camaraderie and an outreach to agnostics and atheists and free thinkers and other like-minded people who want to explore things calmly and with an open mind. And by open mind, we'll talk about what that means in a minute. And but search for the Atheist Society of Knoxville and to find this group. And maybe we can put that on the television, atheists, religion in the schools, and just ask.
Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about
the Rationalists of East Tennessee
organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
All right, welcome back. The Rationalists of East Tennessee have Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussions of subjects topical and timeless. Once a month, we get together for book club. You need not have read the book to attend, but of course it helps. Visit rationalist.org to find us. All right, and we've got the second promotional video.
If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun.
All right. Well, speaking of that book club, here's the schedule. On April 14, we have Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain. May 12 is Answers for Aristotle, How Science and Philosophy Can Lead Us to a More Meaningful Life by Massimo Pigliucci. And finally, on July 9, we have Collapse, How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed, the revised edition by Jared Diamond. All right. Well, viewers, give us a call. We're talking about how religion is trying to get its way into schools. So, Joe, why do they keep trying to push religion into schools? Is it because their churches aren't doing a good enough job?
Well, that's not an easy question, because I think some preachers differ from each other. Some preachers just simply don't grasp the notion that people can be moral without their particular religion. They just don't seem to get it. In fact, sometimes they seem to break the commandment against lying and lie about atheists. Say, well, atheists, have no grounds for religion, for morality, and often say are immoral just because they don't believe. In fact, I wanted to raise the question of this. Socrates, the great philosopher, was put to death, and one of the charges was atheism. Now, was he an atheist? Well, from what I can read in his dialogues, the real charge is he had a different religion. He was not an atheist, but he just had a different version. By the way, Jesus, according to the Gospel of John, was put to death for the charge of blasphemy. We don't want to forget that, because in the Gospel of John, they charged him of making himself equal to God. Now, I've heard preachers accuse atheists of making themselves equal to God. And in certain countries, of course, you executed atheists along with other people with different religions. So it's we'll have to admit we are a very violent species, and part of the Constitution of the United States was set up to try to restrain this violence by saying, whatever your religion or not religion, you're free to practice it and promote it, so long as you keep the civil peace and respect other people. In other words, don't use force and violence to promote your religion. And as we've often said on this program, Roger Williams, the Baptist, said, if you use force in religion, it's no longer religion. You corrupt both the state and the church. Now, there are some people who want to put creationism, it's their view of a God, into the science courses.
So, Joe, outline for our viewers, what are the assertions of creationism?
Well, creationism is a view that there is a supreme intelligence that designed the whole universe and then brought it into being out of nothing. Now, if they quote the book of Genesis and are what's called a young earth theorists, they hold the earth and in fact the universe came into being in 6 days. And from their point of view, the yom is the Hebrew word. From their point of view, 6 days
for a day.
Yeah.
Yom.
Mm-hmm.
How would you spell that?
Oh, that's Hebrew. Y-O-U.
All right.
Y-O-M would be, I guess, English.
Okay, Y-O-U-M.
Yeah, Y-O-M. Maybe I can't remember now. I learned it in Hebrew, but anyhow. Now, many Christians say no. Yom can mean not just a 24-hour period, but it can mean a period of time, in the day of this or in the day of that. and that could be a stretch of time. And so the old Earth theorists, these are among creationists. You got two
All right.
schools. The old schools, the old Earth theory is just six. Is that these periods of time could be thousands or millions of years. And that what they're trying to do there is connect creationism with modern science.
Not connect so much as trying to make it compatible.
Well, that's I'm using their language. In other words, they want to say that their religion incorporates this. But from your point of view, they're using science. But anyhow, looking at it from their point of view, they're trying to say that God did create the world, but it took thousands and millions of years to do it. In other words, then you drop that and you move on and find out how, because the Bible didn't tell you how. And you got to have science say, well, what happened this, what happened this, what happened, next.
So it seems that the older creationists, they kind of want to acknowledge science where we would agree that science is right, and they're just trying to get over the fact that science is kind of maybe disproven Genesis as a literal interpretation.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas the young earthers, they're trying to save the literal interpretation that really snakes did talk, for instance.
Yeah, now those people really take seriously. I mean, they have to. What's interesting to me, you have more people who believe in God, a lot more people, than in the devil. Okay. In other words, a lot of the people who believe in God don't believe in a devil.
When you say God, you mean the God of Abraham?
No, not particularly. All I'm saying is God in the sense of this, what I'm just described, is God created the world, and that's vague enough.
Okay, and that's not the God of Abraham.
Well, from their point of view, those who hold the God of Abraham, they could put that in, but other views could instead.
So it almost seems to me like we need a word that can't be mistaken for the God of Abraham, because many of the people in our audience are not going to make that distinction. They won't think to. I'm afraid some of the people in our audience maybe don't even know. Okay,
it's even more complicated than that, because even when you have the God of Abraham, you're using the word Yahweh.
Or Elohim.
Well, Elohim is another word.
My name is Lord, the Bible also says, so
and then
apparently Lord's a name.
Well, that's English, but Adonai would be a better the Hebrew would be Adonai.
Okay.
But then the King James translation uses Lord to cover several of these versions. Now, but you raise a good point. Is in the Hebrew Bible, you don't just have the God of Abraham. You have these versions of a deity already in existence. Elohim. In fact, you got El.
Okay.
Him is plural. Elohim. Im is the Hebrew plural for El. So it was incorporated, but then translated as singular.
Aha.
So, but it's, and you got these various versions of a creator God, and of course your question is quite sensible. Is, well, do you have a generic view? And this has been one of the problems getting back to prayers in the school.
Yeah.
There's been a tendency in this country to sort of water this down, to just say God, and then let people fill in the blank. And one woman said, why don't we do this? To whom it may concern.
To any passing deities, we offer the following requests.
Whatever version you hold to.
So when you mentioned this sort of idea of watering down what God means, that struck me.
That's what happens.
Then as being what you were condemning earlier, which is intellectually dishonest. If they're doing that on purpose, then they're being dishonest.
And they're doing it mostly for political reasons, so that you can bring the word God in and not have a lot of controversy. But to do this, you're actually creating a controversy. Isn't that just a generic notion? It's taking a word and doing with it whatever you want to do, just to please the politician who wants to somehow get elected because people think he's religious.
Robert Ingersoll wrote in his book Some Mistakes of Moses that, religions probably begin, long ago when there was no writing, religions were an oral tradition. And when writing was invented, religions got written down. But then with the passage of time and the accumulation of more facts about the universe, you find incompatibilities. And thus he says that a religion that began as honest tries to preserve itself through dishonest means by redefining
yeah. Yeah, and that you find this, it's okay if people want to do this, as long as that's why it's important to keep an academic study, to trace down the evolution of this, or at least the development of this, so that you can see what has actually happened.
So, Joe, how tell our viewers, how would you trace down an evolution? What does that mean?
Okay.
They're going to deny evolution exists, and they're going to think when you say evolution, you mean our common ancestry with apes and bacteria.
Okay. Now, the word evolution existed before that.
Yeah.
It means simply the development.
All right.
And in this context, how this particular word developed.
Okay.
You see,
when you say word, you mean the book.
Well, like Yahweh. How did this concept develop? Elohim, how do these words develop?
So how do they look at the development?
Well, you have, for example, El in a lot of the literature, like Baal, and they spell B-A-A-L, but it sounds awfully much like El.
All right.
And you got Samuel, Daniel, people naming themselves after their god El. And that has one tradition. These are tribal developments.
All right. Wow.
And then
That was a nice insight. So Samuel would be, the name El is incorporated. So much like a modern name people have is Christian, which is
Christ.
in a sense declaring their
Yeah, we do it all the time, like Christmas. You got Mass and the Mass and Christ Mass. And then you take words and put other things together. So these words for God have a long tradition of polytheism, it seems to me. Thou shalt have no other gods before me already presupposes the existence of gods. And they're trying to single out one of them to make them the head honcho. And the Greeks already had polytheism. Now, what was interesting to me is you had the Hebrew tradition, the Greek tradition, highly polytheistic. Then you had Philo, a Hebrew in a Greek world, writing in Greek, coming up with the notion of God with Sophia as his co-creator. Now, Sophia is translated wisdom.
All right.
Now, and try to think the logic. Trying to think, well, God wouldn't create without wisdom. But then they personified wisdom. You see what I mean?
Okay.
And made it, and it looks to me like Sophia becomes a god, so that by the time you get to the Apostle Paul, he refers to Christ as the Sophia of God. And that's incorporating, it seems to me, a lot of the polytheism or some branch of it into his monotheism. Then you get the Trinity. It looks awful much like the development of polytheism incorporated.
So answer for me. In Constantinople is a great church of I guess what would be called the Eastern Orthodox Church, and it's called Hagia Sophia. Maybe I've asked this before, but what does the Hagia part mean then? If Sophia is knowledge,
that's the holiness of it. And
so it's holy knowledge. So it's the Church of Holy Knowledge.
Well, yeah. When you think of wisdom from their point of view, and it's divine, then they're going to put the. And then, of course, it means the development of the commentaries and the insights, like the Book of Proverbs or something. And yeah.
All right. So,
in fact,
to drag this back to science, though, you began by saying how in Texas, there's been efforts to try and push the teaching of creationism into the schools. Up in Pennsylvania, some years back, there was a school board that mandated that their students be read a statement in biology class that there are other theories other than evolution. And how did that play out? I assume you know what I'm referring to.
Well, that's bootlegging in religion into your science course. You don't need politicians who basically are not trained in science or religion. What's interesting to me is most of these politicians aren't scientists, and they certainly aren't theologians. So what are they in this in the first place?
In fact, yes, creationism.
They're a bunch of weather vanes. You know?
Yeah, creationism is a science. Only a politician could think creationism is a science.
Now, to be fair to these evangelicals, for example, who aren't politicians, although they use politicians, and people like Falwell, who basically is not even an evangelical so much as a fundamentalist, or was, he's dead now. But he was, it seems to me, he was a theocrat, a politician who wanted to have what he believed was a Christian nation. And by Christian, he meant his particular...
His flavor of.
His particular flavor, yeah. And of course, the founding fathers discovered this was a mess. And that's why I think in the Constitution they said Congress shall make no law respecting, you know,
establishment of religion.
Or preventing the free
exercise
thereof. Yeah, another keep out.
So if we think about, well, the people who want to pray at their county commission meetings, they're going to say, well, you're preventing our free exercise of religion. That's going to be their argument.
Well, as far as I know, Jesus, there's a passage in the New Testament that says, pray in silence. And as far as I know, this is not preventing anybody from praying.
Yeah,
it does mean that they can't.
What it means is that they want to. What they want to do is they want to pray when they're on the payroll, so to speak, and they want to pray using the podium of the government.
There's a passage
to the audience that is there to conduct public business,
and that's condemned in the New Testament. Jesus condemns the Pharisees, maybe unjustly, but he condemns them for doing these public prayers. That's apparently he in this the gospel writers understood this was a problem of using prayer publicly as some kind of control mechanism.
Well, at least certain authors did. Obviously, there are other times.
Well, you have clear in the Old Testament in which prayers are a kind of control device. You know, they're public, and now. If people want to do this in public in their churches or with their groups, that's their business. And that's what the Constitution protects.
And the Constitution protects that vigorously.
Yeah, and I'm all in favor of that. I'm just saying it should not be where you have a political or a public office and gathering. You can't import one religion.
Because that would be misappropriating the government property.
Yeah, it's discrimination, yes.
Well, we should sum up here the topic in a few minutes, and then in the last minute or so, we need to do our closing dialogue.
Okay.
So, religion in schools, that idea, unless they're going to be vigorous enough to do real comparative religion.
If they're going to really do academic studies of religion, academic study, well, and comparative religion is a good example, and even if you did just the New Testament, you know, if you want to really get an academic study or the Old Testament or the Koran and do an academic study, that's another ballgame. But that's another...
In other words, teach the history of it and...
Development of it.
The evolution there. Well, hey, we've got about half a minute left. It's time to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Please send us feedback. You can leave voicemail at 865-272-9060. I'd like to leave you with a word of Douglas Adams. It's his birthday this week. All opinions are not equal. Some are a very great deal more robust, sophisticated, and well supported by logic and argument than are others. Thank you, and happy